The United Alliance Training Academy sprawled across several vast planets, a towering institution built to house and train the best soldiers from every corner of the galaxy. Aliens of every shape, size, and species filled its halls. Xyrenians, Thals, Voraxians, and many others, each with their own unique abilities and cultures. But among them all, there was one human cadet, Jake Hawk Harrow, who was quickly becoming a legend. Jake was the only human cadet in the academy, and while he had earned respect for his skills, he had also gained a reputation among the other students. Unlike most humans, who had only recently been allowed to join the United Alliance, Jake had quickly made a name for himself. He was fast, smart, and, most importantly, tough. His Earth-based martial arts training had proved more than effective against the far stronger alien cadets. It wasn't long before the rumors started circulating. Some of the aliens respected Jake for his abilities, while others saw him as a challenge to their superiority. Today, though, Jake was facing something he had encountered many times before: the group of bullies who had made it their mission to test the limits of his patience. The scene unfolded in the cafeteria, a massive hall lined with long tables, where cadets of all species sat together, eating and chatting in multiple languages. Jake had just sat down to enjoy his lunch, a simple meal of protein-packed Earth foods, when the group of alien cadets arrived. There were 5 of them: Gork, the enormous Voraxian with skin like stone; Zetra, a lithe Xyrenian with the ability to move faster than the eye could track; Val, a hulking Thal with muscles the size of small boulders; and 2 others whose names Jake didn't even care to learn. They were notorious for picking on the weaker cadets, especially humans, who they considered inferior. Jake didn't flinch when Gork, the leader of the group, approached his table. The Voraxian's sharp eyes narrowed as he glared down at Jake. Gork was easily 3 times Jake's size, his thick body a wall of muscle and armor-like skin. The others stood just behind him, smug grins plastered on their faces. "You think you're one of us, human?" Gork's voice rumbled, deep and menacing. "You think you belong here?" Jake didn't respond right away. Instead, he picked up his fork and took a slow bite of his lunch, maintaining eye contact with the giant. He had learned early in his academy career that the best way to deal with bullies wasn't to give them attention, but to let them make the first move. The others began to laugh, the sound echoing through the large hall. The Xyrenian, Zetra, stepped forward, her quick movements blurring as she flicked her tail with mock disdain. "This planet's food is as pathetic as your species," she sneered, poking a finger at Jake's plate. "Nothing but starches and protein." Jake set his fork down calmly, looking around at the group. "You can say whatever you want about my food," he said, his voice steady, "but you don't get to touch it." His words were soft, but the quiet fury in his eyes was unmistakable. Before Jake could even react, Zetra's fingers moved with lightning speed, and in a flash, she knocked his plate off the table. The contents of his meal splattered onto the floor, a small mess of protein cubes and vegetable slaw spreading across the tiles. The laughter grew louder, echoing off the walls as the alien cadets watched. Gork stepped forward, towering over Jake. "What are you going to do about it, human? Cry to your commandant?" His grin widened as he crossed his arms, the other cadets still snickering behind him. Jake sat in silence for a moment, his fingers tapping rhythmically against the table. The entire cafeteria seemed to hold its breath. Most cadets were too afraid to intervene, especially with Gork involved, but Jake wasn't afraid. His gaze remained unwavering, and slowly, a smirk began to tug at the corner of his lips. "No," Jake said, standing up from his chair. "I'm not going to cry. But you're going to regret this." The aliens froze, confused. They had expected Jake to back down. They had expected him to be weak, just like the other humans they had encountered in the past. But Jake wasn't like the other humans. He had spent years training in Earth's toughest martial arts and combat techniques, and he had the reflexes to match. He might have been smaller than Gork, but in that moment, size meant nothing. Before Gork could even raise his fists, Jake moved. In an instant, his hand shot out, grabbing Zetra's wrist before she could retreat. He twisted her arm behind her back with the precision of a master, using her own momentum to throw her off balance. As she crashed to the floor, Jake's eyes were already on the next target. Val. The Thal was larger than Jake, but his movements were slow compared to the human cadet. Jake ducked under Val's massive swing and slammed his knee into the Thal's midsection. Val gasped for air, stumbling backward, and Jake capitalized on the opening, delivering a quick strike to his throat that sent the larger cadet into a daze. Jake's movements were fluid, his body a blur of speed and precision. The other alien cadets were already reacting, but they were too slow. Gork charged forward, roaring in fury, but Jake sidestepped him effortlessly. As Gork swung, Jake grabbed the giant's arm and used his momentum to flip him over his shoulder. The Voraxian crashed hard onto the floor, the sound of impact echoing through the cafeteria. The remaining two cadets, who had been watching from the sidelines, now saw the situation clearly. They had underestimated Jake. They charged at him simultaneously. One from the left, one from the right. But Jake was faster. He ducked under the first blow, using the momentum of the second attacker to propel himself into the air. As he flipped, he kicked both of them in the chest with a force that sent them sprawling backward. In less than 10 seconds, all 5 of the alien bullies were on the ground, incapacitated. The cafeteria was eerily quiet as the other cadets looked on in disbelief. Jake stood in the center, his chest rising and falling as he caught his breath, a faint smile on his lips. He didn't say a word. He simply walked back to his seat, picked up his tray, and calmly began to eat what was left of his meal. The stunned silence of the cafeteria slowly gave way to murmurs as other students began to process what had just happened. Jake had just taken on 5 of the toughest cadets in the academy, and he had taken them down in less time than it took most of them to draw their weapons. The incident was over, but its impact was far from it. Jake's reputation was no longer just about his skills. It was about the fact that humans were not to be underestimated. They may have been new to the galactic stage, but they were proving themselves to be more than capable of holding their own. And Jake Harrow was leading the charge. The cafeteria was still silent when the first of the Academy's security officers arrived. By then, Jake had already returned to his seat, his food mostly untouched. He sat quietly, his posture relaxed, though his eyes scanned the room as the officers moved toward the group of alien cadets sprawled out on the floor. They were groaning, trying to pick themselves up, but none of them could move as quickly as Jake had. "Get up." Gork, one of the security officers, a tall Thal named Jirak, grunted as he crouched beside the Voraxian. Gork didn't even react at first. He was still trying to regain his senses, his body dazed from the fall. With a heavy sigh, Jirak helped him to his feet. "This is embarrassing," he muttered, glancing at Jake, who had gone back to his meal as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. As the alien cadets struggled to rise, the murmurs of the other students grew louder. Some of them whispered in disbelief at how quickly Jake had taken down 5 of the strongest cadets in the academy. Others exchanged looks of respect or fear. Jake knew that things were going to change from here on out. He could feel the shift in the atmosphere. The 5 cadets, Gork, Zetra, Val, and the 2 others, finally managed to gather themselves. Though they looked far less intimidating than they had moments earlier, they were bruised, beaten, and clearly embarrassed. The one called Zetra, her pride shattered, was the first to speak. "This is not over, human," she hissed, her voice venomous. Jake didn't respond. He simply glanced at her for a moment, then turned his attention back to his meal. He had no interest in engaging with them any longer. The damage had been done, and he knew the outcome. These cadets wouldn't bother him again. At least, not in the same way. The security officers, clearly confused about what had happened, glanced at each other. "You're lucky the Commandant isn't here," Jirak said, his voice low but stern. "Otherwise, I'd be reporting you for your conduct, Harrow." He didn't look angry, but there was a hint of warning in his tone. He knew better than to challenge a cadet who had proven himself so capable, but it was his duty to remind Jake that the academy had its rules. Jake finally stood up, wiping his hands on his pants. He didn't look at Jirak as he spoke. "I didn't start it. They're the ones who spilled my lunch." His voice was calm, his eyes now glancing toward the exit. He didn't care for the academy politics or the officers' reprimands. He had already done what he needed to do. I suggest you take your complaints to the commandant, Jake continued. He'll probably tell you the same thing he tells me every time. I'm not here to make friends. Jarak frowned, but he didn't press the issue. He nodded, signaling to the other security officers to help the cadets up and get them out of the cafeteria. As they all began to leave, the atmosphere in the room began to shift. The students who had watched the fight began to talk amongst themselves, their voices growing louder as they discussed the unexpected outcome. Jake sat back down, ignoring the stares of those around him. He was used to the attention by now. He had been the center of attention ever since he had enrolled in the academy. But now, things were different. The aliens who had once looked down on him now had a different view of the human cadet. And Jake didn't mind. He liked the respect. But more than that, he liked the feeling of proving the aliens wrong. As Jake finished the last of his meal, a familiar figure approached. It was Lieutenant Naya, a Thal officer who had been watching the scene unfold from the sidelines. She was tall and imposing, with dark, piercing eyes that seemed to see right through you. Unlike the security officers, Naya didn't waste time with pleasantries. She went straight to the point. "Jake," she said, her voice serious, "we need to talk." Jake didn't respond immediately. He simply stood up and nodded, following her as she led him out of the cafeteria. The door closed behind them, and they were soon walking down one of the academy's many long, metallic corridors. Naya didn't look at him as they walked, her expression unreadable. When they reached a small, private room, Naya turned to face Jake. "That was impressive back there," she said, crossing her arms over her chest. "But you need to understand something." She paused, searching his face for any signs of reaction. "You can't just go around fighting every alien cadet who insults you. You're a cadet here, and there are consequences." Jake met her gaze, his expression steady. "I didn't start the fight. I didn't go looking for trouble." Naya sighed, sitting down at a small table. "No, but you've made a name for yourself, and that's not always a good thing, Jake. The other cadets, they're not going to let this go. You're human, and they'll be watching you now, waiting for the next opportunity to put you in your place." Jake leaned against the wall, his arms folded across his chest. "They don't scare me." Naya studied him for a long moment before nodding. "I know. That's the problem." The room was silent for a few beats. Jake knew what Naya was getting at. She was trying to warn him about the dangers of drawing too much attention. But he didn't regret what he'd done. In fact, he had enjoyed it. The aliens thought they could bully him, push him around. But they had learned a harsh lesson. Naya leaned forward, her eyes serious. "The commandant wants to see you." Jake raised an eyebrow. "What about?" "He's heard about what happened in the cafeteria," Naya replied. "And he wants to talk to you about your future here. About what happens next." Jake nodded. It wasn't the first time he'd been called in for a talk with the commandant. But this time, he had a feeling it wasn't going to be the same as the last few meetings. This time, it was different. The two of them made their way to the commandant's office, located at the heart of the academy. The commandant was a veteran of countless battles, a respected leader among the Alliance forces. His office was stark, lined with holoscreens, displaying maps of the galaxy and the current status of intergalactic conflicts. He stood behind a large desk as Jake entered, his steely eyes meeting the young cadets. "You wanted to see me, sir?" Jake asked, standing at attention. The commandant's voice was low, but it carried authority. "I've heard about what happened. 5 cadets, 5 of the strongest, most skilled students in the academy, taken down by a single human." He paused, his gaze piercing. "You've done something here, Harrow. You've made a statement." Jake didn't say anything. He wasn't sure what the commandant wanted from him, but he could feel the weight of the conversation. "Let me be clear," the commandant continued. "I don't care about what happened in the cafeteria. But you've now made enemies of some very dangerous cadets. And I need to know that you can handle the consequences of that." Jake straightened. I can handle it. The commandant studied him for a moment longer, then nodded. Good. Because you're about to face a lot more than a few insults in the cafeteria. Your actions have put you on a path that could lead to something bigger. A lot bigger. Jake didn't flinch. He had come to the academy to prove himself, and now, it seemed, that opportunity had finally arrived. Jake walked out of the commandant's office with a sense of unease settling in his stomach. The conversation had been short but intense. The commandant had made it clear that Jake's actions had sent a message not just to the other cadets, but to the entire academy. He had proven that humans were not to be underestimated, but that very proof had put him in a dangerous position. He could already feel the weight of the stairs as he walked down the corridor. The cadets who had been whispering about him before now watched him closely, some with a mixture of awe and fear. Others, particularly the alien cadets who had witnessed the cafeteria incident, avoided his gaze entirely. But there were still a few who glared at him, resentment clear in their eyes. Jake didn't care. He had never been one to back down from a challenge. But the commandant's words echoed in his mind. You've made enemies of some very dangerous cadets. He knew he couldn't just keep fighting every time someone crossed him. He had to think bigger, especially if the academy was going to prepare him for the wars that lay ahead. As Jake made his way toward his dorm, a group of cadets caught his attention. They were standing near the training hall, a few of them whispering among themselves. Jake's instinct told him that something wasn't right. He approached cautiously, his hand instinctively reaching for the small blade he carried as part of his standard gear. Just as he stepped closer, one of the cadets, Val, the hulking Thal who had been one of the bullies in the cafeteria, stepped forward. His eyes were dark with anger, his muscles tense beneath his uniform. You think you can just walk around here like you own the place, human? Val growled. The other cadets around him were silent, watching Jake closely. They knew what had happened in the cafeteria, but they weren't yet sure how far Val was willing to take things. Jake didn't flinch. His posture remained relaxed, his gaze steady. What's the matter, Val? He asked, his voice calm. You look upset. Val's fists clenched. You humiliated me, in front of everyone. His voice was low but filled with an edge of fury. And now, you're going to pay for it. Jake wasn't surprised by the challenge. He knew this was coming. What did surprise him was the number of cadets gathered around. Val wasn't acting alone. This wasn't just a personal grudge anymore, it had become something bigger. You've got a lot of friends now, huh? Jake said, his voice cool but with a hint of amusement. Did you come here to fight me? Or did you bring your whole squad with you? Val snarled, taking a step forward. This isn't just about you and me anymore. You've embarrassed us all. And we're going to make sure you never forget that. Jake sighed. He had hoped it wouldn't come to this, but it was clear that Val and his friends weren't going to let it go. They had gathered here, most likely hoping to force him into a fight, but Jake wasn't about to give them the satisfaction. All right, Val, Jake said, cracking his knuckles. Let's see what you've got. With a roar, Val charged forward. His speed surprised Jake at first, but he quickly adjusted. Jake sidestepped the Thal's massive swing, ducking low to avoid the punch that would have sent him flying across the hall. He planted his feet and pivoted, using Val's own momentum to slam the larger cadet into the floor. Val groaned as he hit the ground. But Jake didn't let up. He spun around and launched a series of quick strikes to the Thal's ribs, targeting the weak spots that Jake had learned to exploit in his training. Val grunted, but before he could recover, Jake delivered a swift kick to his side, knocking the air out of him. For a moment, it looked like the fight was over. But Val wasn't done yet. He gritted his teeth and pushed himself to his feet, his eyes blazing with anger. You're fast. Human, he growled. But not fast enough. Val lunged again, but this time Jake was ready. He ducked and spun, catching Val's arm and twisting it behind his back. With a fluid motion, Jake kicked Val's legs out from under him, sending the larger cadet crashing to the ground once again. This time, Val didn't get up. He lay on the floor, gasping for breath, his body bruised and battered from the quick, precise strikes. Jake stood over him, his chest rising and falling with the effort of the fight. But he didn't say anything. He didn't need to. His actions had already spoken louder than words. The other cadets were silent now, watching in stunned disbelief. They had expected Val to take down the human cadet. But instead, they had witnessed something completely different. Jake had beaten him effortlessly. The power dynamics had shifted once again. And the cadets were starting to understand something. Jake Harrow wasn't just another human. He was something more. For a long moment, there was no sound except for the heavy breathing of the cadets and the soft hum of the Academy's ventilation system. Then, someone spoke. "You think you've won, human?" One of Val's friends stepped forward. He was a Xyrenian, quick and agile, but still smaller than Jake. "You may have beaten Val, but that doesn't mean you can take us all down." Jake's eyes flicked to the Xyrenian, then to the others who had gathered. He didn't feel fear. He didn't even feel anger. He simply felt the weight of the situation. The truth was, this wasn't just a fight. It was a battle for respect. And in the Academy, respect was everything. "Do you want to try?" Jake asked, his voice calm but firm. "I'm not afraid of any of you." The Xyrenian hesitated, looking around at the other cadets. It was clear that they were beginning to realize the futility of this fight. Jake had already proven that he could hold his own, and none of them were eager to test that again. After a long pause, the Xyrenian stepped back. "This isn't over, human," he said, his voice filled with quiet rage. Jake didn't respond. He simply turned and began walking away, his footsteps echoing down the corridor. He had made his point. The cadets who had once seen him as weak or inferior now understood the truth. Humans weren't just capable, they were dangerous when pushed too far. As Jake walked away, he could hear the murmurs of the cadets behind him. They were talking among themselves. But he didn't care what they said. He had already proven what he needed to. But there was one thing that still lingered in the back of his mind. The Commandant's warning. "You've made enemies of some very dangerous cadets." Jake knew that this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning. The Academy was about to get much more dangerous, and he had no intention of backing down. Later that day, Jake was summoned again, this time to the Commandant's office. He entered the room, where the Commandant was waiting for him. His hands folded on the desk. "You've caused quite a stir, Harrow," the Commandant said, his voice steady but stern. "I've heard about your fight with Val and his friends." Jake didn't say anything. He had learned by now that the Commandant wasn't interested in excuses. He wanted results. "You're proving a point, but I need to make sure you're prepared for what's coming next," the Commandant continued. "There are bigger challenges ahead, and you need to be ready." Jake nodded, his expression serious. He had already proven himself in the Academy, but he knew the real test was yet to come. The Commandant's words weren't just a warning, they were a call to action. "This isn't over," the Commandant said. "But you're one of the few cadets I can rely on when the time comes." Jake didn't respond immediately. He knew what was coming next, and he was ready. The war was on the horizon, and he would be ready to face it head-on. But first, he had to survive the Academy's growing challenges, and that meant dealing with the enemies who would stop at nothing to bring him down. Jake stepped out of the Commandant's office, his mind racing. The warning the Commandant had given him wasn't just about the cadets in the Academy. There was something bigger at play now. Jake had been thrown into a world where every decision, every action, carried consequences not just for himself but for his entire species. He wasn't just proving his worth among the cadets anymore. He was becoming a symbol for humanity. The news of his fights with Val and the others had spread like wildfire. In every corner of the Academy, cadets whispered about the human who had taken down 5 of the most feared students in less than 10 seconds. Some called him a hero, others a troublemaker, but no one ignored him anymore. Jake knew that this kind of attention could be both a blessing and a curse. It had earned him respect, yes, but it had also made him a target. Val and the others would not forget their humiliation so easily, and there were still many others in the Academy who looked down on humans, viewing them as inferior, incapable of matching the strength, intelligence, or skill of the other races. He walked through the hallways, heading toward the training grounds, where the next round of challenges awaited him. The Academy's training facilities were state-of-the-art, designed to push cadets to their physical and mental limits. As Jake approached, he saw a few familiar faces, cadets he had met since arriving at the Academy, some of whom had been there long before him. But today, something felt different. The air seemed thicker, charged with tension. There was an uneasy silence hanging over the group of cadets gathered near the entrance to the training grounds. They parted as Jake approached, their eyes shifting toward him. He noticed a few new faces among the crowd, cadets who had clearly heard about his reputation, but hadn't yet seen him in action. They looked at him with a mix of curiosity and caution. Jake didn't care. He wasn't here to impress anyone. He was here to train, to improve, and to prove that humans were more than just a footnote in the galaxy's history. As he entered the training room, he was met by Lieutenant Naya, who stood waiting at the center of the floor. Her expression was serious, her arms crossed over her chest. She had seen Jake's skills firsthand and understood the gravity of the situation better than anyone. "Jake, we need to talk," Naya said, her voice firm. She gestured toward a nearby corner, away from the other cadets. When they were out of earshot, she turned to face him. "I know you're trying to prove something. I get it. But you're walking a fine line. The other cadets, especially the ones who have been here longer, aren't going to let you keep this up without consequences." Jake met her gaze. He wasn't surprised by her words, but that didn't mean he liked hearing them. "I'm not afraid of them, Naya. I've already shown them what I can do. Let them try something." Naya shook her head. "It's not about fear, Jake. It's about survival. This isn't just about fighting in the halls or the cafeteria. If you keep going down this path, you'll draw more than just a few angry cadets. You'll be fighting entire factions of the Academy. And that's not something you can handle alone." Jake took a deep breath, his hands clenched into fists. "I don't need anyone's help. I can handle it." Naya's eyes softened slightly, but her voice remained firm. "You're a lot stronger than you think, Jake. But you need to start thinking bigger. The Academy is a training ground for something far more dangerous than just bullies and rivals. The war is coming. And when it does, every cadet here will have to choose a side." Jake's mind raced. He had known about the growing tensions in the galaxy. There were rumors of an intergalactic conflict brewing, one that could tear the United Alliance apart, but he hadn't really understood the scope of it until now. The Commandant had hinted at it, but Naya was making it clear. The stakes were much higher than just proving himself to the aliens who had looked down on him. "You're not just fighting for yourself anymore," Naya continued. "You're fighting for all of humanity. The war is coming, and how the rest of the galaxy views us will determine our place in that war. So you need to start thinking about what kind of symbol you want to be." Jake didn't respond right away. He wasn't sure what Naya expected from him. The truth was, he didn't care about symbols. He cared about action, about doing what was necessary to protect his people. But the idea that his every move could shape humanity's place in the galaxy was something new. It was a weight he hadn't anticipated. Before he could respond, a loud voice called out from across the training floor. "Haruo!" Jake turned to see Gork, the massive Voraxian, stepping forward, flanked by Val and Zetra. The group had clearly gathered, their eyes fixed on him. Gork's expression was one of simmering rage, his fists clenched at his sides. "You think you're better than us, human?" Gork's voice boomed across the room, his words carrying a challenge. The others behind him looked equally determined, their eyes full of fury and contempt. They hadn't forgotten the cafeteria incident, and now they had come to settle the score. Jake's muscles tensed, but he didn't move. He could feel the weight of the entire room on him now. This was what Naya had been warning him about, the moment when his actions would finally catch up with him. "Let's do this," Jake said, his voice low but steady. He didn't care about the numbers. It was one thing to take on a few cadets in a hallway or a cafeteria. It was another thing entirely to face off with the entire group, all of them gunning for him. But Jake was no stranger to odds stacked against him. Without warning, Gork charged. His massive body hurtled toward Jake, fists swinging. But Jake was faster. He dodged the Varaxian's first punch, slipping to the side and delivering a quick jab to Gork's ribs. The impact made Gork stagger. But it didn't slow him down for long. The Varaxian came back with a brutal elbow aimed at Jake's face. This time, Jake wasn't fast enough. The elbow clipped his cheek, sending him stumbling backward. But Jake recovered quickly. He had no intention of backing down. Not now. Not ever. As Gork advanced again, Jake crouched low, using his agility to dodge the next swing, and instead grabbing Gork by the arm and twisting it behind his back. The Varaxian growled in pain. But Jake didn't let up. With a swift movement, Jake flipped Gork onto the ground, pinning him there with a knee on his chest. But Jake couldn't hold the position for long. Val and Zitra were already on the move. The Zyrenian darted forward, trying to land a quick strike to Jake's ribs. Jake saw it coming and sidestepped, using the momentum of Zetra's strike to throw her off balance. As she tumbled to the floor, Val came charging in, swinging a heavy fist. Jake ducked under the punch and kicked Val hard in the knee, sending the larger cadet crashing down. For a moment, Jake was in control. But the battle wasn't over yet. He knew it wouldn't be. The academy had its rules, and those rules were about to be tested. Naya watched the fight unfold with a mixture of pride and concern. She knew Jake's potential, but she also knew the cost of pushing too hard, too fast. He was a powerful force, but there were limits. And soon, those limits would be tested in ways even Jake couldn't imagine. As Jake took on his opponents one by one, he realized something. The academy was no longer just a place to prove his strength. It was a battlefield, and he was about to find out just how far he was willing to go to protect everything he held dear.